those of you online that can't tell, I can't control the people in the building. It's wonderful that we want to talk and be together. Those that came in just a couple minutes ago, there's a handout for today. It's on the media station back there. If you didn't get a copy, please feel free to get up and go get one. It won't hurt my feelings at all. Appreciate Lee filling in last week. We went to visit Kylie and Harding for family weekends. Did that a year ago and didn't turn out so good. This time it was great. Everything turned out fine. Well, the trip was fine last year. Just getting home after that wasn't so good. But we're back. We're in place. We're going to keep going with Ezekiel this time. I'm going to turn over to chapter 6. That's where we're going to pick up today. Work through chapter 6 and 7 this week. As you can see on the slide, entitled Devastation of the Land. Ezekiel's going to prophesy the coming judgments. No visions, just a straight prophecy today. We're going to pick up in chapter 6. Going to start with verse 1, just read a little bit of it, and then we'll have some discussion and thoughts about the first part. The word of the Lord came to me, Son of man, set your face against the mountains of Israel. Prophesy against them, and say, You mountains of Israel, hear the word of the sovereign Lord. This is what the sovereign Lord says to the mountains and hills, to the ravines and valleys. I am about to bring a sword against you, and I will destroy your high places. Your altars will be demolished, and your incense altars will be smashed, and I will slay your people in front of your idols. I will lay the dead bodies of the Israelites in front of their idols, and I will scatter your bones around your altars. Wherever you live, the towns will be laid waste and the high places demolished, so that your altars will be laid waste and devastated. Your idols smashed and ruined, your incense altars broken down, and what you have made wiped out. Your people will fall slain among you, and you will know that I am the Lord. I'll be honest, I'm not a huge literary person in the sense of understanding literature and its construction and the different modes and manifestations. And these verses, these opening verses, besides the picture of destruction that is coming, the object of discussion is a bit interesting. Ezekiel is talking to the mountains, the prophecies to the mountains as if they were personified. Personified. So, simple question for me, since I don't know the literature that well. Why do you speak to the mountains? Why do we personify? Why were the mountains a problem? The hills, the ravines. And I know literally they weren't, but there's a device going on. That's kind of the imagery we want to understand behind what's happening. Okay.
That's not what you're looking for. I'm sure that there is.
Sure, there's nothing. God created the mountains, and so he's not happy.
It comes to my mind that it may be a symbol of protection, because I know several of the songs as the mountains around Jerusalem.
Okay.
The Lord surrounds you with protection, but maybe that's protection.
Sure. And he's saying that the mountains symbolize protection, and Jerusalem is surrounded by mountains. Certainly, and now they've turned these mountains into a place that's not desirable because of the practices, the altars, the high places. Jimmy?
Well, it occurred to me that quite often in Scripture they talk about the high places, and that was where that they set up their idols.
Exactly. That's where they're at. And if you picked up through the reading, he talks about that. We're going to demolish and smash these high places and these altars. And what I glean from those that, again, know literature a little bit better than I, it's a poetic device. Okay, I get it. And so it's a poetic message. Get my voice working. Is it just me? Can anybody else hear the bubbling behind? Okay, that just makes sure I'm not hearing something. I'm sure it's the baptistry. You don't often hear a babbling brook behind you in the middle of an auditorium. Okay. All right. So we have a poetic message of destruction, a device to say, hey, and to the point you're all making, I think there's an element there from all of the answers, that this is where, if you kind of didn't think about it, and I didn't, just reading through, that this is the location of where they go for their high places and the altars. And so they're going to be destroyed. Now, it's not unique to them. It didn't start with the Israelites, with those in this area. It started with the Canaanite nations. Okay? The high places were there. The Israelites simply adopted them or retained them and kept them through. So we see, again, the influence of the other nations, which through their history was one of the things God warned them about, not to be influenced by those around them. But they were. God had actually told the people to destroy these places, to destroy the altars and these elements, so they would not be a temptation, a distraction to them. I want to turn over quickly to Deuteronomy 7. There's an example of this idea that they were to destroy these high places. Deuteronomy chapter 7, picking up in verse 1. When the Lord your God brings you into the land you are entering to possess and drives out before you many nations, the Hittites, Girgashites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites, 7 nations larger and stronger than you, and when the Lord your God has delivered them over to you and you have defeated them, then you must destroy them totally. Make no treaty with them and show them no mercy. Do not intermarry with them. Do not give your daughters to their sons or take their daughters for your sons, for they will turn your children away from following me to serve other gods. And the Lord's anger will burn against you and will quickly destroy you. This is what you are to do to them. Break down their altars, smash their sacred stones, cut down their Asherah poles, and burn their idols in the fire. For you are a people holy to the Lord your God. The Lord your God has chosen you out of all the peoples on the face of the earth to be his people, his treasured possession. Same song, second verse. This is not new to the Israelites. You will be tempted, you will turn away, you will engage in idolatry, you will be punished. You read through, again, the book of Deuteronomy, Numbers, the warnings, coming at it from this end, reading through Ezekiel and studying, and then going back and looking at the prophets again, it's like, wow, how do you not get the message? Of course, then I look at my own life and say, oh, I get it. I do understand why you don't get the message. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as we go along this morning. But their destruction was coming because, of their idolatry. And God was very clear with the Israelites that it wasn't because of them. There wasn't anything particularly special about this group of people, about this nation, this lineage of people. It was because of him. And he was taking them in, and they were to destroy the people because of their wickedness. Another quick verse, or set of verses, Deuteronomy chapter 9. I don't have this on the screen, but Deuteronomy chapter 9, verses 4 and 6. It reads, after the Lord your God has driven them out before you, do not say to yourself, the Lord has brought me here to take possession of this land because of my righteousness. No, it is on account of the wickedness of these nations that the Lord is going to drive them out before you. It is not because of your righteousness or your integrity that you are going to take possession of their land. But on account of the wickedness of these nations, the Lord your God will drive them out before you to accomplish what he swore to your fathers, to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Understand then that it is not because of your righteousness that the Lord your God is giving you this good land to possess, for you are a stiff-necked people. He told them going in, you're pretty much going to be just as much of a problem as they were because of rebellion, their self-serving interest and inclinations. Which God was punishing. And again, the warning for them. And again, just a subtext in it, or a sub-point, it kind of struck home with me, that this destruction is coming because of the wickedness of their practices, the wickedness of the nations. And when you think about this idea of utter destruction, God is really calling for a change of culture. So you've got to get rid of all of these practices, the culture, the systems that they had in place. Get rid of it. Just destroy it completely, which of course they didn't do. But that was the change that he was calling for. This, and again, I guess to me it illustrates the severity, or just the anathema, if I can use that word, of idolatry. That what it means to God, how it impacts God. And we'll see more of that, the pain that it causes him when his people are idolatrous, when they worship other idols, other quote-unquote gods. And that's part of these prophecies. Ezekiel is telling Israel, this is what's happening. This is why it's happening. The easy application, quick side trip for us, kind of that you learn from the past. do we learn from the mistakes of others? We learn not to repeat the mistakes of the past. Kind of interesting. I'm not sure how many history buffs we have, how many people love taking history in school. I sort of liked history. I still like history. I know my children weren't enamored with it. Neither of them wants to be a historian. Okay, that's fine. Most of us aren't. And we like to move on, look forward. But there's lessons to be learned. And we should, pick up from the past. A little more directly, thinking about, well, how well do I learn from others? From their mistakes, from their successes as well. It's not all negative. Learning from others and appreciating. And then from my own past, the mistakes I made. Okay, don't do that again. And I start thinking, here's a little simple example, a little bit tongue-in-cheek, but I'm going to ask for honesty, okay? And I'll be honest too. How many of us have ever gotten a speeding ticket? A speeding ticket. John, you got a heavy foot? Get a little fast at times? Okay. Long time ago? All right, here's the real hard question. How many have gotten more than one? Yeah. I'll be honest, it's been a long time. Okay, I've learned.
Not as long as it might have been.
not as long as it might have been, maybe should have been. Again, that's a simple example. But part of it's, and this is the illustration with the Israelites, and not all, if you're a behavioral psychologist, reward and punishment systems, there's effectiveness there. God spoke to his people literally for hundreds of years. Don't do this. Turn back. Don't do this. Punishment's coming. Punishment's coming. So patient with them. So patient. We can learn lessons of patience ourselves. Patience with ourselves, with our spouse, with our families, with our friends. But Ezekiel now, and this is the tough love of this message, he said, the words are going to be fulfilled. And it's here. And it's real. We've already made the point. We'll come back to it again a little bit later on in Ezekiel. Those that went back, the remnant, learned the lesson. Okay? What I'll call overt idolatry, and I use those quotes specifically, their worship of other identifiable gods, quote unquote, little g gods. Didn't happen. Okay? They were consistent, I won't say faithful, well, consistent in their worship of Jehovah. They didn't always follow it as God laid it out for them. And we know, moving into the New Testament era, they just took the law system and it went crazy. And all the additions they made to it. But no overt idolatry. The high places, the altars, those things don't come back. They learn the lesson, the tough love that was happening for them. Okay? And that's important. To see, okay, I do need to learn. And it can be helpful if I pay attention. Now with the message of destruction, there's also the message of hope. And this is woven out through Ezekiel. That a remnant will be spared. A remnant will be spared. Let's pick up again in Ezekiel chapter 6, picking up in verse 8. But I will spare some, for some of you will escape the sword when you are scattered among the lands and nations. Then in the nations where they have been carried captive, those who escape will remember me. How I have been grieved by their adulterous hearts, which have turned away from me, and by their eyes, which have lusted after their idols. They will loathe themselves for the evil they have done, for all their detestable practices. And they will know that I am the Lord. I did not threaten in vain to bring this calamity on them. So again, the first 7 verses, destruction is coming. All these high places, all these altars, the people that are worshiping there will be destroyed. But a remnant will be saved. And if you think through the different groups here, Ezekiel's prophesying about what's happening in Jerusalem, in and around, to the people there. That's where the destruction is occurring. And you have those in captivity. These are the remnant. We'll see again a little bit farther into Ezekiel. Those in Jerusalem, they feel like they're the ones that were spared because they're still there. They didn't get taken into captivity either time in the two ways. They're not like their relatives to the north, that nation that got dispersed by the Assyrians. They're still there. Ezekiel's telling people, no, you are the remnant. You are the ones that will learn the lessons, that will come back to God. It's what you need to understand. He has brought you here as the remnant. You are the ones that will ultimately go back. this group will have the chance to rebuild both the temple, Jerusalem. They will know, the remnant will know God. They will come back to His Word, a word that's not to be ignored, not to take lightly. And one of the things, again, I don't think about enough, maybe you all are in a similar position. And it's going to be a lot more overt in the later part of Ezekiel, but it starts here. It starts in these early chapters. They would know the pain that they've caused God. He wants them to understand this does affect me. What you do affects me. Now, your actions have consequences. That's where they're at now, the consequences of their history. But it's not something He delights in doing. God is grieved by both their idolatry and now by the punishment that they must endure. Personal question, okay, gets to me. It's like, do I think about, when I sin, the mistakes in my life, the pain that causes God? Do you think about that? What you do can hurt God. This is Almighty God, the Creator, the Sustainer, the Savior. But what I do can cause Him pain. I don't think about that enough. I really don't.
Me either.
Yeah, these people certainly didn't. That got me thinking, okay, the relationship that God has brought us into and the imageries that He gives us. And if you pick up on it, it talks about the adulterous relationship that Israel has with their idols. He's putting it into a very clear context that ideally they would understand, that we will understand. Think about the marital relationship or the unfaithfulness in a personal relationship with others, the love relationship. I think that's what John is talking about. That's the point of 1 John, or one of the points of 1 John 4:19. Our biblical faith, the relationship we have with God, is a love relationship. We love Him because He first loved us. And we are blessed with marital relationships, some, close friendships, close families. We have people in our lives we love, and they're important to us. And when we do something to hurt them, we know it, we recognize it. We don't want to do that again. We don't like to see the pain in others that we've caused. So I need to translate that in this relationship with God. That I don't want to cause Him pain either. That's where my obedience comes into play. Our obedience comes into play. We have that right relationship. I think it's just reminders. Lessons that we're given very now. They got to the point, you've gone too far. And we can go too far too. So there's a warning there as well. You have to be careful. Now I don't have to go that far, and I don't have to even get close to that destruction point. Huh?
You know, that's where He encouraged us all through the New Testament about love.
Mm-hmm.
If we truly love Him, then we understand the hurt He feels, then we change the behavior that we're doing.
Absolutely. And there's a mix of, I get too much training in psychology, so I think of everything through a psychologist's lens. There's a mixture of psychological schools of thought here. Okay, reward and punishment. Okay, let's go there. And we learn that system alone will not be sufficient. It's got to be volitional. There's got to be a choice, which is another system that we've come up with in our minds to understand things that we choose because of the motivation out of love. He's done this for me when we come to recognize He is the creator. One of the key points, remember, we come back to from the first lesson, God is in control, and God will always be in control. Okay? It's His creation. That's the first thing we've got to come to grips with. People have to come to grips with there is a God, and you will stand before Him. And it can be marvelous. It can be a wonderfully anticipated transition from this physical to whatever that spiritual will be like. I don't know. that we can look forward to. Marilyn?
It's very sobering to reflect this, we're all human, we all sin, but we'll personally reflect, it's very sobering. And it's a downer to realize that we have caused God pain
Yeah.
and hurt, and all He offers us, when I say all, is, you know, is unconditional love, His mercy, His grace, just everything good, and then here, we cause Him pain.
Yeah.
And it's just, it's a downer. But then, as a mature Christian, we realize we have an opportunity now to just praise Him
Right.
because of who He is and what He has done and what He continues to do all of the time, and His forgiveness, and is still, you know, merciful, grace, and like that, no matter what.
Absolutely.
So the praise concept is very rewarding personally, you know, as we work through when we get to that part.
I think what Marilyn's describing, at least, and correct me if I'm misinterpreting what you're saying, there's a cycle of growth and maturation. There's a cycle of transformation that we go through. And it very much mirrors our physical and emotional maturation in this existence. Okay? Remember those teenage years? I'm far enough away I can act like an older person. I'm past 50. I'm closer to 60 than 50. You knew it all, didn't you? Didn't you? You knew it all at that point in time? You didn't need anybody to tell you anything, do anything for you?
No, you only thought you knew. You didn't care.
Yeah, there you go. You thought you knew it all. We thought we knew it all. But we grew past that,
Yes.
okay? And that's, again, the cycle of God in a relationship with us, teaching us, I'm here. You're separated from me. There's sin. And there's a real downer when we come to that realization. But if we stay there, we're in serious trouble because we'll never get to the point of praise and appreciation of grace. Oh my goodness, as we mature and transform, we realize the grace that is extended to us every day. And our appreciation for that. And we praise Him for what He does in our lives. As we live in obedience with Him. Not because I have to, because I want to. And that's a subtle difference in words, but it's mountainous in action. Okay? Again, it's part of that transformation. And we see this imagery, if you will, borne out through the history of Israel, through where they're at now. They're at the destruction point. God's saying, we don't have to go there. Christ went there for us. He went to the destruction point. And we can accept that, again, that gift of grace and be so thankful and be transformed into it, living in it, or we can turn away. Because we get distracted. Now we're back to all the altars and high places. We let things distract us and turn us away, draw us away. The Hebrew writer talks about drifting. It ain't been any one big thing, it's just kind of over time. And then we're gone. And then we're back, we get to these points. So that's the warnings. I know that this is a challenging study, challenging book, because there's a lot of tough love, tough stuff, destruction. People are going to die. The temple's going to be destroyed. The city's going to be burned again. And God says, that's done. That period is over. It's time to start anew. Come back to me, which they will. We'll see that. We won't see the remnant leaving in Ezekiel, but we know the story. We know it does carry forward. The promises, though, are in Ezekiel. But there will be a remnant. They'll go back. They'll understand. Talked about from week 1, the hope that they can have in their relationship with God. The lessons are given to them, to us, to all that will be able to access the word of the challenges that are there for them. So we got to get back to Ezekiel, and we got to get back a little bit to the punishment. Okay, it's still there. Let's pick up in Ezekiel 6 again, verse 11. This is what the sovereign Lord says. Strike your hands together and stamp your feet and cry out, alas, because of all the wicked and detestable practices of the people of Israel, for they will fall by the sword, famine, and plague. One who is far away will die of the plague, and one who is near will fall by the sword, and anyone who survives and is spared will die of famine. So will I pour out my wrath on them, and they will know that I am the Lord. When their people lie slain among their idols or on their altars on every high hill and on all the mountaintops, under every spreading tree and every leafy oak, places where they offered fragrant incense to all their idols, and I will stretch out my hand against them and make the land a desolate waste, from the desert to Diblah, wherever they live. Then they will know that I am the Lord. Ezekiel was to be emphatic in his speaking to the people. Strike your hands, stamp your feet, cry out to get their attention. Because punishment is coming, but to those that are left behind, those that are in Jerusalem. Now it strikes me as odd at times. Okay, I'm not questioning God's wisdom, but it strikes me as odd at times. Ezekiel is speaking to the remnant. He's speaking to those in captivity about what's going to happen to those that are still in Jerusalem. They're not hearing the message. Kind of wonder, well, what if he was speaking to them? Well, the good news is there's other prophets that are. Okay, we're looking at Ezekiel, but there are other prophets speaking to those still in Jerusalem. Jeremiah, contemporary of Ezekiel, telling them what's coming. What's coming. You think, well, could they have repented? Sure they could. Sure they could have. Now, that wouldn't stop the destruction. It was still going to happen, because God's word would be fulfilled. But personally, they could have been back in a relationship with God. But we know they didn't. Again, we'll see that as we go through Ezekiel. We'll look at some of the parallels, some of the prophecies that are fulfilled in Jerusalem as he gives them to those in captivity. This one's pretty severe, the threefold judgment. It's threefold here. A little bit later on, it's going to be four. He's going to add a fourth element of punishment, of destruction. But plague, sword, and famine. It's kind of, again, sobering. Many will die from the plague. If that doesn't get you, those that are still in the city, those coming in to destroy it will kill you with the sword. And if that doesn't get you, you're going to die of famine. Remember the purpose? What's God trying to communicate to these people, to those that will know of this over time? 4 times in this chapter, 4 times the same verse, the same wording appears. Verse 7, verse 10, verse 13, verse 14. See it? And they will know that I am the Lord. Again, a little bit of the irony of Israel's history. They've seen God's power manifest. They've seen his word. They know of his word fulfilled through their history. And now they're going to see it again. This will also be a message to the nations around that will hear this, because some of the prophecies are going out to other nations as well. They're hearing these words. Not necessarily Ezekiel, but some of the other prophets. They will know that I am the Lord, the one true God. God will be known by all men, Israelite and non-Israelite, for what he is, the God of the world, the God of history, the God who speaks and does not speak in vain, as he says in verse 10. We live in an interesting time. There's so many different thoughts about, is there a God? Is there one God? What's he like? This or that and the other. He's told us if we're going to listen. Jimmy?
Well, it strikes me that it would take this sort of treatment before they would know that he is the Lord. In spite of everything that he has done to bless them, they didn't know that he was the Lord.
And I
Sometimes
forget.
it's the hard times that wake us up.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to Marilyn, or ties back to Marilyn's point in terms of our offering of praise, our awareness, and in our maturation and our transformation, that what's in the forefront of thought. And part of it is an awareness of God. I've really come to believe this in the last few years, not just in the last year. That hasn't hurt. I've considered and reinforced. He is. And we've got to recognize Him every moment of every day. That I live in Him, He is around, and blessing and caring and directing. A lot of times the ways I don't understand. That's the lesson I learned this last year. I don't know. Just quit asking why. It really doesn't matter. It really doesn't matter. It's where do we go? How do I respond to the circumstances that I'm in, that I'm dealing with, that I need Him to follow through. And we'll get to, not quite just yet, but there's a critical point coming, dependence on God. That's probably, you'll know that I'm the Lord and that you need me. It doesn't work without God. That's what He wants us to understand in part. Go ahead, Marilyn.
There's a little book entitled Practice of the Presence of God. It was written in the 1700s, and it's a great little read. It's just what you're talking
Okay.
about now, awareness all the time. It's no different than that sign. I guess it's the mountains are the line, mission field.
Yeah.
Church or Christianity is not just when we're in this building, there's nothing special about this building. Christianity is in my heart, because you live with me and you all the time. And the book is just a great little read from many, many years ago that just stressing.
What's that title again?
The practice of the presence of God.
The Practice of the Presence of God. Great title. I think those come back to 2 points, Jimmy. Yeah. There are times in my life we need the punishment. We need the reward. The punishment reward system. Get your attention. Get our attention to bring us back to that focus. I think as we're maturing, ideally, I don't have to be beaten as much. Doesn't mean that there's not struggles in life. There are differences with just some of life is tough. We have difficult times, but they're not all spiritually driven. It's the spiritual knowledge, the spirituality that brings us through those, that helps us to move through those and move forward. And to demonstrate that grace and mercy to others that is demonstrated to us. There's that awareness, that knowledge. It's that continuing presence. And how do you do that? Everybody's going to have to figure out their own way. A lot of folks, it's daily meditation, their reading, their prayer time. A lot of folks like to put notes and stickers and things around the house to just remind me. God is, He's here, He's there. And that influences what I'm doing, who I am. There's a song out currently. I do not know the author. I do not know the title. I know some of the lyrics because it's a very catchy tune. And to Marilyn's point about leaving, church is not the building. And the key, or not the key, but the main lyric in the chorus, you can take me out of the church, but you can't take the church out of me. So we know this building goes, things happen, but the church is us. God is in us, with His Spirit in us, directing us. And what we do and where we go and what we're dealing and struggling with. But the lessons are still coming for the Israelites. Let's look into chapter 7 in the time we have left. The end has come. Okay, the end for Jerusalem and the temple has come. And I'm just going to highlight chapter 7. We don't have time to read all of it, so we'll go through the key, what I think are the breakdown of the elements. This chapter collectively, and in verses 1 through 9 in particular, highlight that this judgment is coming because of their idolatry. Plain and simple. Okay, plain and simple. And the news of this destruction, I find this fascinating, will spread. It's not just a lesson for the Israelites, it's a lesson for those around them that will see this happen. Now, we'll pick up on some other prophecies a little bit later on in Ezekiel, other nations. God's not going to just punish Israel. He's going to do that. The Babylonians are going to come back and they're going to destroy Jerusalem and the temple. The Babylonians are also going to go out and they're going to destroy a lot of other nations that surround Jerusalem, that surround Israel. To the four corners of the world, people will learn and hear of God's judgment. Sorry, another side note. I find it fascinating that in this period of time, other nations knew about Jehovah. Think about the example of the Philistines, when the ark ended up in the cities of the Philistines. Okay? They knew this was the ark of a god. They knew of Jehovah, but they chose not to worship him. Now in their case, he manifests, again, his power. You love the imagery. You know, they put it in front of, is it Dagon, I believe? And he just knocks it over. And they stand him back up the next day, they come in, and now it's broken apart. Okay, you don't mess around with Jehovah. And they got rid of that thing. Get rid of that ark. Back to the study of Daniel that Lee just completed a few weeks ago. And Nebuchadnezzar's response. Again, he acknowledged this God, this quote-unquote one of the gods, but he still continued in idolatry with his gods as well. And I know I can't speak for our study culture, but we seem to have lost a sense of gods. Again, we rely more on who we are, particularly in this country. The independence, and the self-sufficiency we've been taught over time. And we just rely on self. We don't rely on. We don't look to another God. We don't look to anything else for our dependence. I mean, that's a huge lesson for the Israelites, for us, because God still is. And we depend on him. Whether we know it or not, this is the interesting, we depend on him. And he just wants us to recognize that, because it will change how we live when we recognize that dependence on him. Okay, the rest of chapter 7 breaks down into a few, to me, kind of clear sections. You look at verses 10 through 13. Talks about what the people, the rest of this chapter will talk about what they've trusted in, what they've depended on, and everything but God. And he's telling the people, none of these things are going to help you. Okay, your business systems, okay, the economic system is going to be totally disrupted. Okay, that's fairly self-evident when you cut off a city, isolate it. Commerce comes to a grinding halt. Okay? We found that out with the pandemic. People stay in, people don't go out, work slows down. All the distribution problems we experience, we're still challenged with. Okay? The economic system breaks down. Okay, so they're going to see this. They're going to say, you can't buy your way out of God's judgment. That's the first component here in verses 10 through 13. Okay, the buyer and the seller, they will not be able to, their purchases will be worthless. We might say it this way today, you can't buy your way out of punishment. You can't buy your way out of God's judgment. It's not going to happen. Verses 14 through 18 talks about military might. One of the things we know from Israel's history, from the history of the people, when they were attacked by a certain nation and they needed help, they'd go out and buy help from another nation. Try to find a bigger, stronger bully to take care of their problem. Okay? Relying on the defense of others. And we'll see in some of the coming prophecies, Egypt was one of the nations that Israel would turn to at this point in time. While Nebuchadnezzar and the army are dealing with Jerusalem, they're just going to side trip and they're going to go down and take care of Egypt at the same point. Okay? And take them out and destroy them. Any defense that man can try to mount is futile. Okay? And he repeats again God's threefold judgments: sword, plague, and famine. Also talks about the futility of wealth. Sort of related to the first point. I really kind of struggle to these be separated, but I think there is a difference. The first is about their system in buying and selling. The second, in this instance, in verses 19 through 22, I think it's about their attitude, their personal focus on the stuff and not the spiritual. At least that's how I would couch it for us. So your material wealth, again, is useless. It's not going to help you. In fact, it's part of the problem. In fact, it's a big part of the problem. Their wealth is what contributed in part to their idolatry. They used that wealth to make idols. But that would be taken from them. The city and the temple we know are going to be destroyed. You know, Paul writes about the futility of the love of money and the struggles with it. Christ talks about it. You can't serve God and mammon. Have you ever thought about what's the struggle with wealth? Yeah, we know it's a struggle. Why is it a struggle?
Why do we struggle with it?
Yeah, why is it a struggle in the sense of why does it turn us away from God? Why does wealth draw us away from God?
Will become our idol.
Want more?
I'm just saying, become our idol.
Okay.
And it becomes a thing that we depend on.
There you go. Yeah.
Government can be an idol.
Yes, it can. Sure it can. But we put our trust in it. Marilyn, you going to say something?
Yes, it's the same answer as this. It really helps satisfy self.
Yes.
Oh, I want a new car. Oh, let's head out to the house. Oh, wow, look at the bank account. It just is very satisfying.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Wealth brings friends. So if you have a lot of friends, maybe the world's not so evil.
Okay. Wealth attracts friends. It attracts people. It's a source of security, a source of power. It becomes our power. If I have this, I don't need. We depend, as John said, it's not a complicated situation. We depend on that rather than depend on God. There's nothing wrong with the wealth. Use the wealth to do wonderful things. The challenge is not becoming dependent on it. I became convinced a long time ago, I'm never going to be super rich here. I'm just not going to happen. Because I'd come to depend on it. I would depend on that more than God. This was the last lesson I prepped before the accident last year. And one of my last taglines is, this is the key issue, learning to depend on God. I had a lot of time to lay in a bed thinking about, I can do nothing right now. I can't walk, I can't get up. I can't go to the bathroom like a normal person. I got to depend on something else because I can't be me. And the bank account doesn't do a thing for me, except keep me in hospital. Allows me to be in. I mentioned earlier that word depend, that concept of depending on God, it has a whole new meaning for me now. I've got a constant reminder, and maybe that's what I needed in part. To help in my transformation. I need to depend on Him. Because He does so much. And getting that cycle of praise, that's the key. You got to keep moving forward to appreciate the blessings. Because then that's what people see. The joy. People are not drawn to the downers. They're drawn to the joyful. Because God has filled us with so much. It's amazing. He's telling his people, this is where you've missed it. Rely on Him, not the other stuff. One more element to finish this out. Their political systems will not save them. And I find this again interesting. God is going to use an evil nation to punish them. He says it right out. An evil nation will come and destroy you. He will be there against Judah, but also against the other nations. We'll see those prophecies a little bit later in Ezekiel. What are the people going to do in times of trouble, in times of difficulty? They turn to the prophets. They look to their priests. They look to their elders for counsel. The same type of things we might think of. Well, we go to our leaders. We go to our security systems, our police. We go to lawyers, no offenses. Our systems, our legal systems. God's saying, all gone. Things we would normally depend on in our physical thinking, in our limited thinking. None of it's going to help you. You're not going to beat it. And then one other one that we may not think about as much, but it's actually been on display with our friends over in the UK in the last few weeks. Their royal leaders, the kings, the princes, etc. Not going to help them. That's all going to be gone too. And all will mourn together because of the destruction. And he closes again with the purpose statement. What are we doing? Why is this happening? Then they will know that I am the Lord. And we will know that He is God. Not a new message, but But it's a point in time in history when it culminates all the warnings. You know, why did he wait so long? I don't know. I have no idea. I'll never understand. I won't know. It doesn't matter. He brought it to this point in time to display his power so they would recognize who he is. And that message would go out. They would learn to trust again, Okay, next week we're going to pick up in chapter 8. We're going to look at chapters 8 through 11. If you want to read ahead, I would suggest you do so. And we're going to get a lot of the details of their idolatry. We talk about, well, they go to the high places, they go to these altars. What are they doing? We're going to look at the details that he gives in chapter 8 specifically about their corruption, to see the devastation that it brought to God because of their actions. Appreciate your attention, your contribution this morning. We will pick up again next week.